everybody. Over the course of the past week, we've been talking about Eldrazi. We've talked about the deck, the overall strategy, the card choices, how to play the deck, how to sideboard with the deck against the top 10 most popular decks in Modern, flex slots and different builds of the deck, and tips and tricks and nuances for the deck, whether you're playing it or playing against it. And also why you should play Eldrazi. So I want to combine all those videos into one giant, comprehensive deep dive. Enjoy.
Well, the Eldrazi finally came. Yeah, this basement's not gonna protect me. I don't know why I came down here.
Eldrazi is a deck that sort of cheats super powerful colorless creatures onto the battlefield with lands that produce multiple mana, the Ancient Tomb lands, basically. Things like Eldrazi Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth, plus alongside Scions, can give you a lot of mana very, very quickly, allowing you to cast Worldbreaker or Emrakul or Devourer of Destiny very early and kill your opponent's land with Sowing Mica Spawn. And even better, it's a few $100s cheaper than other tier 1/2 decks, existing somewhere in the $500 range, where a lot of other tier 1 decks are $800 or more. Though with that comes with a little bit of a price. A lot of the cards in Eldrazi are a little niche in that they're only good in the Eldrazi deck, where a lot of other tiered decks have cards that are like good collection cards that exist across a lot of different archetypes. But it isn't just like hoping you get a good hand and can play a fatty in the early turns. It also has some really good play with Kozilek's Command, allowing you to remove things from the graveyard, remove things from the battlefield, draw cards, make a bunch of mana. And there's a lot of really interesting decision points that you can make, especially with that one card. And maybe the best part about this deck is every card, or every payoff in the deck actually, is just so powerful that it can end the game with just 1 or 2 cards, as long as the rest of the deck cooperates that you can set up those 1 or 2 cards. It has good and bad matchups like most other decks. Its good matchups include Yawgmoth and blue-white control, and bad matchups are like Amulet Titan, Mill, Burn, and Storm. But it still remains a very, very good deck. So this is Eldrazi Ramp in Modern. Ugh. What this deck is effectively attempting to do is use lands like Eldrazi Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth to produce more mana than you probably should. They use these alongside Utopia Sprawl and Talisman of Impulse to have so much mana that they can easily cast cards like Sowing Mica Spawn Kick to put pressure on your opponent's mana and get yourself even more mana, Devourer of Destiny, Worldbreaker, Sire of Seven Deaths, and eventually Emrakul, the Promised End. As far as the other lands we have, we're playing primarily green, but also splashing red for Kozilek's Return, Rising Chrysalis, and Stone Rain. So we're playing Stomping Grounds and a bunch of fetch lands alongside Commercial District just for the Surveil land, because it's a little free. Playing a single Cavern of Souls so that our Eldrazi's have difficulty being countered by things like Consign, and a Bojuka Bog to attack opponents' graveyards alongside Sanctum of Ugin, which is a colorless land that says whenever you cast a colorless spell with mana value 7 or greater, you may sacrifice this land. If you do, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So it's just another way to fetch out even more super powerful Eldrazi. All these things can be searched out by Sowing Mica Spawn, which I'll talk about now and then just go mana cost order. But Sowing Mica Spawn is really, really relevant to the lands. Sowing Mica Spawn is a 4-mana 3/3 with the Void kicker for 2 mana, and when you cast a spell, search your library for a land card, put it to the battlefield, and then shuffle. If you cast a spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. So we're able to exile our opponent's lands and put a lot of pressure on our mana if we're able to kick this, but just casting this in general means we can use our lands as sort of a toolbox. We can grab lands. If we need more mana, we can grab Eldrazi Temple or Ugin's Labyrinth. Normally it's just Eldrazi Temple. If we want to attack the graveyard, we can grab Bojuka Bog. If we're worried about things getting countered, we can grab Cavern of Souls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or Sanctum of Ugin if we want to, have more threats or whatever. And we can use Sowing Mica Spawn for that, which is just so powerful. It isn't just like grab a basic or whatever. As far as our 1-mana spells, we're playing 2 Ancient Stirrings. Ancient Stirrings is a 1-mana sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a colorless card from among them and put it into your hand, then put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. This just adds a ton of consistency to the deck. The only things it doesn't grab are some sideboard cards, Utopia Sprawl and Malevolent Rumble. It grabs literally everything else in the deck because everything has Devoid or is just straight up colorless. And so it's kind of like a Ponder. Playing for Utopia Sprawl. Utopia Sprawl is a 1-mana enchantment. Enchant Forests. As this aura enters, choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So it's just another way to ramp and also another way to fix for our red mana if we really want it. We're playing 4 Malevolent Rumble, excuse me, is a 2-mana sorcery. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a permanent card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. Create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this token. Add a colorless mana. So the cool part about this card is it's kind of just a better Ancient Stirrings. 1, it ramps you. You get an Eldrazi spawn, which is awesome. 2, the stuff you don't select goes into the graveyard, which fuels Delirium for Emrakul, which is just super, super good. And it grabs all permanents, which means it literally grabs everything except for Kozilek's Command and Kozilek's Return. I'm playing 4 Talisman of Impulse, a 2-mana artifact. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can pay a life and add a red or a green. Just another great way to ramp mana, especially if you go like Ugin's Labyrinth into Talisman of Impulse on turn 1 and then cast and then cast like Ancient Stirrings or something is so good. We're playing 3 Kozilek's Return. Is a 3-mana instant with Devoid, deals 2 damage to each creature. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell with mana value 7 or greater, you may exile this card from your graveyard. If you do, this creature deals 5 damage to each creature. So it's a great card against decks that are attempting to go wide. The deck that immediately pops into my head is like Red White Energy. Before I talked about Sowing Mycospawn, Spawn, so Writhing Chrysalis is a 4-mana 2/3 with Devoid. Whenever you cast this spell, create 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this token, add a colorless. It also has reach, and whenever you sacrifice another Eldrazi, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. That is just so disgusting. So it creates the spawns. So Writhing Chrysalis ramps for future turns, which is awesome. It's also a big blocker because we often use these spawns that we get from Writhing Chrysalis and from Malevolent Rumble and from Kozilek's Return. And so it's a very good big blocker, and then it becomes a really big attacker as we sacrifice more and more spawns. Playing 2 Worldbreaker. Worldbreaker is a 7-mana 5/7 with Devoid. When you cast a spell, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land, and it has reach. And you can pay 3 mana and sacrifice a land to return this card from your graveyard to your hand. It's just great main deck artifact or enchantment hate, and then if you don't have any artifacts or enchantments to hate out, targeting lands alongside Sowing Mycospawn Spawn is also super, super powerful. And it's a recurring threat if the game goes wildly long. Playing 4 Devourer of Destiny. Devourer of Destiny is a 7-mana 6/6. You may reveal this card in your opening hand. If you do, at the beginning of your first upkeep, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library, exile the rest. When you cast a spell, exile target permanent that's 1 or more colors. So this smooths out your opening hands, which is excellent. And then also in the late game, when we ramp into this card, it is actually very powerful against pretty much every deck except for the Mirror, because it just gets rid of a permanent that's 1 or more colors, which is just most non-lands, and is a 6/6 threat, which is so powerful. We're playing a single Sire of 7 Deaths. I have seen decks play up to 4, though. This is one of those flex slots. It's a 7-mana 7/7 with First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward. Pay 7 life. So this card's just very good against creature decks because it's just super hard to remove and blocks, gains a ton of life. It's just so good. We're playing 4 Kozilek's Command, which is probably the best card in the deck. It's double Devoid and X, Kindred instant Eldrazi, which being Kindred is a big deal for Emrakul. Choose 2. Target player creates X 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this token, add a colorless. Target player scries X, then draws a card. Exile target creature in mana value X or less, or exile up to X target cards from graveyards. So this is ramp. Especially since it's instant, we can do it at the end of our opponent's turn, untap, do the thing. Ramp that can pump Writhing Chrysalis. Be card selection, and not necessarily advantage, but a ton of selection, which really we only need a card or 2 to be able to win the match with this deck. It's removal, and also it's graveyard hate all in 1 card, and it counts as 2 types for Emrakul. Speaking of Emrakul, it is a 13-mana 13/13, costs 1 less for each card type among cards in your graveyard. And we're playing a ton of different card types: Kindred, Instant, Creature, Artifact, Enchantment, Land, Sorcery, all very good. So this can cost very little sometimes. And when you cast this spell, you gain control of target opponent during the player's next turn. After that turn, the player takes an extra turn, and it also has Fly and Trample protection from instants. So you take control of your opponent's turn, which is beautiful because you can pretty aggressively sabotage your opponent during their turn. It doesn't matter that they get an extra turn, and then you just untap and win the game. Normally, when you cast Emrakul, the game's over. So we're ramping as much as we can, getting that good card selection, stopping what our opponent is doing, blocking a whole bunch, and then casting big, dumb idiots like Devourer of Destiny, Worldbreaker, Sire of Seven Death, and Emrakul, and just winning the game just with card quality. As far as the sideboard goes, Dismember is a 3 mana with 2 Phyrexian black. Target creature gets -5/-5 till end of turn. It's great additional removal, especially instant speed removal. We're playing the 4th Kozilek's Return. We've already talked about why that's good. We're playing 3 Stone Rain, 3 mana sorcery, destroy target land. This is mostly good in the mirror match and against Amulet. Good against decks where they have lands that produce multiple mana or lands that are hyper relevant. Playing a single Nature's Claim, green instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Its controller gains 4 life, just good artifact enchantment hate. That is played alongside Force of Vigor. Force of Vigor is a 4 mana instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than play a spell's mana cost. Destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So we have Malevolent Rumble, we have Ancient Strands, we have Utopia Sprawl, and we bring this card in with Nature's Claim as well. Unfortunately, we can't exile Sowing Mica Spawn or Worldbreaker or Writhing Chrysalis because they all have Devoid, so they technically are not green. But we can pay 4 mana for this card very easily, and getting rid of those 2 artifacts or enchantments is pretty powerful. Playing 3 Soulless Jailer is a 2 mana 0/4. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or in exile. Very good against decks like Storm or anything with like impulse effects or whatever. And then we're playing 3 Trinisphere. Trinisphere is a 3 mana artifact. As long as this artifact is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast costs 3 mana to cast, which is excellent against decks that are casting a bunch of super cheap spells like Murktide or frankly even Energy maybe. So this is Eldrazi Ramp. As far as the sideboard goes, we have Dismember for additional removal. We have Kozilek's Return, the 4th Kozilek's Return just for some board wipes. Stone Rain for problematic lands and rampy lands like in the mirror match and Amulet Titan. Nature's Claim is artifact enchantment hate. Same thing with Force of Vigor. Soulless Jailer for silly effects out of decks like Ruby Storm, and Trinisphere for these decks that are playing a lot of cheap things and we want to break that up. The most popular deck in Modern is Boros Energy. Against Boros Energy, we are bringing in Dismembers for additional removal. We're bringing in Kozilek's Return, and we are bringing out Worldbreakers and an Emrakul. Worldbreaker just doesn't do a lot against this deck, and sometimes it can be really difficult getting to Emrakul, though the deck is really good at neutering itself once you take their turn with Emrakul, so we want to keep some amount in. This is how I sideboard against Boros Energy. The second most popular deck is Dimir Murktide. We are bringing in Dismembers again. It's dealing with things like Psychic Frog. It's very important. I'm also a big fan of Trinisphere against this deck, making all the cantrips and stuff like that, and Consign to Memory for that matter, cost so much is very relevant. Not a fan of Kozilek's Return, though it can snipe some things in game 1, which is pretty nice. Sire of Seven Deaths can, even though it has reach, which is really nice, it can do too little because we're playing into counter magic here, and not even having a cast trigger can be rough. And I like shaving a Worldbreaker, and this is how I'm going to sideboard against Dimir Murktide. The third most popular deck is the Mirror Match. Against the Mirror, we are bringing in the Stone Rains. Just take out these 2 mana lands, and we're going to be taking out Kozilek's Return, and this is how I sideboard in the Mirror. The fourth most popular deck is Amulet Titan. Against Amulet Titan, we're bringing in those Stone Rains again, being able to take out the 2 mana lands. Nature's Claim for Amulet and Urza Saga, same thing with Force of Vigor. We're going to be bringing out Kozilek's Return because it doesn't really kill anything in the deck. Sire of Seven Deaths, just when they kill you by a lot, so there's no point in the lifelinky and blocky and stuff. And we're taking out some Writhing Chrysalis. We're not looking to block or whatever, so this is how I'm going to sideboard against Amulet Titan. The fifth most popular deck is Belcher. Against Belcher, we're bringing in the Stone Rains. Keeping them off mana can be a really big deal. Also really like Soulless Jailer against this deck because it stops the Lotus Bloom hands. We're bringing out Kozilek's Return, just straight up doesn't kill anything. Sire of Seven Deaths, they're just better cards to be casting. I'm going to shave on Devourer of Destiny just because it doesn't do anything besides smooth out our hands, I guess. This is how I'm a sideboard against Belcher. The sixth most popular deck is Domain Zoo. Against Domain Zoo, we're bringing in the Dismembers, just as that additional removal that we may need. Also a fan of Nature's Claim because of Leyline Binding, Leyline of Guild Pact, and Scion of Draco. Similarly, Force of Vigor is pretty nice. So we're only going to shave 1 Kozilek's Return because we want some number in, because while the front side barely kills anything in the deck, being able to do it from the graveyard is a really, really big deal. We just don't have time for Emrakul. They just apply way, way too much pressure. I'm just going to shave on an Ancient Stirrings, and this is how I'm going to sideboard against Domain Zoo. The 7th most popular deck is Ruby Storm. Against Ruby Storm, the name of the game is making sure that their mana or cost reducers don't survive. Bringing in Nature's Claim, Force of Vigor. Soulless Jailer is nuts against this deck too, because it means that their impulse effects don't do anything. And Trinisphere making everything cost more, even if they have cost reducers, is another very, very big deal. And then Dismember to be able to kill Ral at instant speed. Kozilek's Return doesn't really do anything. Sire of Seven Deaths just straight up doesn't matter. We're not going to be blocking anything with Writhing Chrysalis. Similarly, like, Worldbreaker is just way too much mana to reliably kill Ruby. And they're just going to shave on a few Emrakul. And so this is how we are sideboarding against Ruby Storm. The 8th most popular deck is the Orzhov Blink deck. Against this deck, Dismember's great, kills Ketramos. Also a fan of Kozilek's Return, kills quite a few things in the deck. We're just going to be taking out Worldbreaker, Slow Too Slow, and an Emrakul, and that's how I sideboard against the Orzhov Blink deck. The 9th most popular deck is Affinity. Now against Affinity, obviously Nature's Claim and Force of Vigor are very, very good. Trinisphere is also good because everything being reduced in cost means it just costs 3 now, which can put a lot of pressure on the deck's mana. And Dismember is good. It's just a needed evil. Kozilek's Return, they don't have a ton of creatures, so I like siding out of Kozilek's Return. Shaving on Emrakul is totally fine. We want to leave the 1 in to grab with Sanctum of Ugin. And Devour of Destiny is not going to be killing much, so this is how I sideboard against Affinity. The 10th most popular deck is Blue-White Control, also known as the Buy. So much so, we want these Kozilek's Return out of our deck, and that's the only reason we're sideboarding, like, at all. And so we're bringing in some Stone Rains, putting some pressure on the mana. Just, we don't want Stone Rain in our deck, but it's better than Kozilek's Return. Putting some pressure on the mana is totally fine. Plus they have some like really good lands that like do stuff sometimes, so being able to do that is really nice. So this is how I sideboard against Blue-White Control. And so let's jump into it and we can start talking about it. So these are the non-flex slots in Eldrazi Ramp. These are the cards that you are pretty bought into playing if you play this deck. These 46 cards in the main deck, you pretty much have to play. And 0 cards on the sideboard. The sideboard is totally up for grabs. So when you decide to make your Eldrazi Ramp deck, you need to decide what 14 cards are you playing in the blank spots in the main deck and what your sideboard is, frankly. I don't think I've ever done one with a totally blank sideboard. In those slots, in the main deck, you could play 4 Ancient Stirrings. Ancient Stirrings is a 1-mana sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a colorless card from among them, put it into your hand, then put the rest at the bottom of your library in any order. Most of your deck is colorless, besides like Malevolent Rumble and other ancient, effectively like a Ponder effect, to be able to churn through your deck. You can play up to 2 Talisman of Curiosity. It's 2-mana artifact. You can tap it to add a colorless mana. You can tap it to add a green or blue. This artifact deals 1 damage to you. It's very good if you're playing those blue cards like Sideboard, Consign to Memory, or main deck Null-Drifter. You can play up to 4 Talisman of Impulse. Talisman of Impulse, 2-mana artifact. Tap it to add a waste mana, or you can tap it to add a red or green. It deals a damage to you. This is kind of the default Talisman because we're already playing green stuff in the main deck, and there's red stuff in the sideboard, and sometimes other red stuff in the main deck in Writhing Chrysalis. Again, green, very, very powerful. All the Talismans have green, but adding the black means you don't have to pay the life on Dismember. You can play up to 4 Karn the Great Creator. It's a 4-mana planeswalker that starts at 5 loyalty. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent control can't be activated. And it's +1 until your next turn. Up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its mana value, and it's -2, which is the real reason we're playing it. You may reveal an artifact card you own from outside the game, or choose a face-up artifact card you own in exile. Put that card into your hand. So it's really nice against decks that have artifacts that need to activate abilities, because the static effect just turns those artifacts off. But its -2 means you can play the sideboard as a wish board, which is why a lot of the cards on the sideboard are flux slots. It's because there are sort of 2 sideboards you can build. There's a wish board if you decide to play Karn in the main deck, and a like more normal sideboard if you don't decide to play Karn. So if you do decide to play Karn, focus more on the artifacts when we talk about the artifacts in the sideboard. You play up to 4 Writhing Chrysalis. It is a 4-mana 2/3 with the Void. When you cast a spell, create 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this token, add a waste mana. It has reach, and whenever you sacrifice another Eldrazi, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is very good against decks that are looking to attack with their creatures. It creates a ton of blockers. It can be a large blocker in itself and can be a crazy threat, especially if you play multiple Writhing Chrysalis or have a really big Kozilek's command to make Eldrazi spawns, and then Writhing Chrysalis gets big incidentally as you use those Eldrazi spawns. Just very powerful. I can play an All is Dust. All is Dust is a 7 mana Kindred Sorcery Eldrazi. Each player sacrifices all permanents they control that are one or more colors, which is nothing in our deck. You can ramp into this with Eldrazi Temple. It's just kind of a nice board wipe. You can play up to 3 Null Drifter. Null Drifter is a 7 mana 4/4. When you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. Notice it's on cast, which is really relevant. It has Flying and Annihilator 1, which means whenever it attacks, you sacrifice a permanent of your choice. Your opponent, I mean. And it has Evoke for blue and 2 colorless, which means you sacrifice it when it enters, which means you can pay 3 mana and just have it draw 2 cards and it go into your graveyard. It's a pretty powerful card that allows you to churn through your deck and also exists as just like another threat. It's pretty easy to get to 7 mana in this deck. You can play up to 2 Sire of 7 Deaths, a 7 mana 7/7 with First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward, pay 7 life. This fulfills a similar role as Writhing Chrysalis, where it's very good against decks that are looking to attack with creatures because it can gum up the board, and frankly, it's really hard to answer. You can play up to 3 Ugin, Eye of the Storms, which is a 7 mana Planeswalker that starts at 7 loyalty. When you cast a spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. So it has a sort of Devour of Destiny effect, where when it's on the battlefield, everything you cast, you just get to exile stuff that's 1 or more colors, so good against everything except for maybe the mirror. +2 is you gain 3 life and draw a card. Its 0 is add 3 colorless mana, which you can do after it comes on the battlefield, which is kind of cool. And it's -11 is search your library for any number of colorless non-land cards, exile them, then shuffle. Until end of turn, you may cast those cards without paying their mana cost, which is just nuts. You ultimate it and you just win the game with this deck. So the issue with Ugin, though, is that your Eldrazi temples don't ramp into Ugin. You need to kind of do it naturally, but it's an incredibly powerful Planeswalker, at least against everything except for the mirror. You can play Devour of Destiny 3 and 4. It's a 7 mana 6/6. When you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, at the beginning of your first upkeep, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library and exile the rest. When you cast a spell, exile target exile target permanent that's 1 or more colors. So if you have this card in your opening hand, it can smooth out your draws, which is pretty important in a deck like this. And then you have it in the late game, it can answer something and be a threat, which is pretty powerful as well. You play up to Worldbreaker. Worldbreaker is a 7 mana 5/7. Has Devoid. When you cast a spell, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land. So very good enchantment hate, incidental, being able to attack their mana alongside Sowing Micah spawn, things like that. Has reach, and we can pay 3 mana and sacrifice a land to return this card from your graveyard to your hand, so it can be a recurring threat even if they answer it. Also, having reach in such a big butt, it's really hard to attack through Worldbreaker as well. You can play 3 Harrogast Erupting Nullkite is a 9 mana 6/6, but it has Emerge for 6 mana and 2 red, which means when you can cast a spell by sacrifice a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's mana value, which means you can do it for 2 red pretty easily. When you cast a spell, you may exile your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards as flying, and each creature spell you cast has Emerge. The Emerge cost is equal to its mana cost, which means you can like play Harrogast by sacrificing something, drawing 3 cards, and then sacrifice Harrogast to like do other really powerful stuff, which is pretty cool, especially getting a really early Emrakul or something is nasty. Speaking of Emrakul, you could play the 3rd Emrakul of Promised End. It's a 13 mana 13/13. Spell costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. When you cast a spell, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn, has flying, trample, and protection from instants. Normally, when you cast this card, the game is over. Being able to take over your opponent's turn, you can kind of neuter what they're doing, and it's just absolutely disgusting. So you're going to be selecting 14 of these 39 cards to add to your main deck. And as far as your sideboard, we got to build it together. Keep in mind, you'll want a lot of probably one of artifacts if you're playing with Karn the Great Creator, just so you can have a large Karn board. Otherwise, you're just building the sideboard like you normally would. You can play up to 4 Consign to Memory. Consign to Memory is a 1 mana instant with Replicate, meaning you can copy it for each time you pay its Replicate cost, which is just 1 colorless mana. And it says counter target, triggered ability, or colorless spell. Very good in the mirror matches, but it has some other incidental applications, similar to like Storm maybe. You could play up to 3 Dismember, just as additional removal. It's 1 and 2 Phyrexian black. Is an instant. Target creature gets -1/-5 till end of turn. Just like decent removal that doesn't have any color requirements. You can play the fourth Kozilek's Return in the board. It's a 3 mana instant with Devoid. Deals 2 damage to each creature, and whenever you cast an Eldrazi creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, you may exile this card from your graveyard. If you do, this card deals 5 damage to each creature. Just very good against these go wide creature decks like Energy or Orzhov or something. You can play it before Stone Rain. 3 mana sorcery, destroy target land. Very good in the mirror match and against Amulet Titan, because it can slow their opponent down and give you time to do your thing, or it can kind of stop them from playing the game, really. You can play Nature's Claim. 1 mana instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Its controller gains 4 life. Great artifact and enchantment hate. Similar to Force of Vigor, which is a 4 mana instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than play spell's mana cost, and destroy up to 2 artifacts under enchantments. Just both very good artifact and enchantment hate. You can play a single Tormod's Crypt if you're playing Karn. It's a 0 mana artifact. Sacrifice this artifact, exile target player's graveyard. So the turn you play Karn, you can grab Tormod's Crypt and have that graveyard hate. You can play Haywire Might. It's a 1 mana 1/1. When this creature dies, you gain 2 life. You can pay a green, sacrifice creature, exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Decent artifact or enchantment hate. Also relevantly, it's exile, so you can take out those silly artifact lands that the affinity player is playing. You can play Pithy Needle, 1 mana artifact. As this artifact enters, choose a card name. Activated abilities of sources with a chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. Very good against Planeswalkers or Yawgmoth or whatever. You can play Liquid Metal Coating, which you would only ever play this alongside Karn the Great Creator. It's a 2 mana artifact. You can tap to have target permanent become an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. The cool part about this is Karn the Great Creator says activated abilities of artifacts your opponent control can't be activated, which means if you do this during your opponent's upkeep on a land, it doesn't care that it's a mana ability. It just can't be activated. And what's doubly really cool is if you activate this on a land and then plus Karn on that land, it destroys that land, which is just disgusting. You can play 2 Soulless Jailer. Soulless Jailer is a 2 mana 0/4. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. Just insane against Storm. Has some applications against Flage, etc., etc. You can play up to 2 Stonebrain. It's a 2 mana legendary artifact. You can pay 2 mana and tap it and exile the Stonebrain. Choose a card name. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. Activate only as a sorcery. Very good against decks that rely on very specific cards in order to win. So decks like Amulet Titan or maybe Ruby Storm, things like that. You could play up to 2 Torpor Orb. Torpor Orb is a 2 mana artifact. Creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. Very good against Orzhov, or again, good against Titan, etc., etc. I can see it against Energy even. You can play up to 2 Void Mirror. Void Mirror is a 2 mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no colored mana was spent to cast it, countered that spell. This is good against decks that are looking to cast things for free. You can play Ensnaring Bridge. Ensnaring Bridge is a 3 mana artifact. Creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can attack. Good against decks that are looking to attack you and are faster than you being able to set up. You can play up to 3 Trinispheres, a 3 mana artifact. As long as this artifact is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana costs 3 mana to cast. Very good against decks that play a bunch of very, very cheap cards like Affinity, or decks that are trying to profit mana like Ruby Storm or something like that. You can play that All Is Dust in the sideboard. We've already talked about it. You can play a Cityscape Leveler in the sideboard. It's an 8 mana 8/8 artifact creature construct with trample. Whenever you cast a spell and whenever this creature attacks, destroy up to 1 non-land permanent, its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token. You can unearth it for 8. Great threat that you can grab with Karn, is kind of the long and short. It's good as Cityscape Leveler. Also being able to just take out permanents incidentally alongside being a threat is really nice. You can play an Engineer Explosives. It's X cost artifact with Sunburst, enters with a charge counter on it for each color mana spent to cast it. And you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice the artifact, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of charge counters on this artifact. Very good against decks that are playing either 0 cost or 1 cost, maybe. Things that just need to be dealt with and they're faster than you being able to set up. You can play up to 2 Chalice of the Void. It's an XX artifact, enters with X charge counters on it. Whenever a player casts a spell with mana value equal to the number of charge counters on this artifact, counter that spell. You want this against decks that have a lot of 1 cost cards because it can just kind of totally neuter their whole deck. And you can play up to 1 Walking Ballista. It's an XX, enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 4 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and you get to remove a +1/+1 counter from this creature to deal 1 damage to any target. Really good for finishing off your opponent. Also really good against small-butted creatures. So you're going to be selecting 15 of these 39 cards. Keep it in mind that if you're playing Karn the Great Creator, you do need to play quite a few artifacts so you can use that Karn board alongside 14 of these 39 cards in the main deck, and then you have your very own but stock version of Eldrazi Ramp in Modern. So these are things that you should probably know whether you're playing or playing against Eldrazi Ramp in Modern. And we're going to start right off with Kozilek's Command is two things for Emrakul. Kozilek's Command is a kindred instant, which means it counts as a kindred spell and counts as an instant spell, both in and of itself for Emrakul. So when you're counting the amount of different types of things in your graveyard for casting Emrakul the Promised End, remember Kozilek's Command is both. So again, obviously we're starting with really simple ones and obvious ones, which brings us to the next thing about Kozilek's Command is that it can replace itself with the mana when you cast it. So if you have like a ton of mana and you top deck Kozilek's Command and you're digging for something relevant, you can just tap all of your mana for Kozilek's Command to scry 1,000,000, make 1,000,000 Scions, and like look for that card, and then be able to, in the same turn, sacrifice those Scions and play the relevant card that you scried to the top. In a similar vein, it can kind of get us out of mana deficits by, at the end of our opponent's turn, doing the same thing, just making a bunch of Scions, 4 or 5 Scions, whatever, scrying a whole bunch or killing something, untapping, and then we have profited as many mana as Scions that we made, and we can play our big dumb idiots in that way. It's also important to remember that Sowing Micah Spawn can toolbox lands, allowing us to grab cards like Cavern of Souls or Bazooka Bog, or even lands that just ramp us like Ugin's Labyrinth or Eldrazi Temple. We can toolbox those from our deck, and that is very strong. And Devourer of Destiny, while it smooths out your draws, it's really relevant that if your first land is a fetch land and you use that fetch land, you lose the card that you put on top. When I first picked up this deck, I totally made that mistake multiple times, having like fetch land, Utopia Sprawl, Devour, reveal Devourer, smooth out my draw, and then go, cool, ramp with Utopia Sprawl, and then like untap and draw, and it's like, why didn't I draw the card I put in the top? Oh, I'm dumb. And so you have to be really careful about that, especially if you're on the play. Also, relevantly with Devourer, if you don't want any of the cards, you can just exile all 4. You don't have to put a card back on top. Also, relevantly with Devourer, you can just exile all 4 cards you look at. You don't have to put a card back on top. Writhing Chrysalis is an incredibly powerful card that's very good at blocking, but also, it's really good at attacking, especially if you pair it with Kozilek's Command. If you make a ton of Scions with Kozilek's Command, like we were talking about earlier in this video, and then sacrifice those Scions, you can turn Writhing Chrysalis into an absolutely massive creature that can end the game on its own after like blocking in the early game for you. So it's able to kind of play both ends of the stick here. Speaking of Devourer and Utopia Sprawl as well, if you cast Devourer of Destiny against a deck that doesn't have any colorless permanence and you have a Utopia Sprawl, you are forced to exile your own Utopia Sprawl. It's normally worth it, you know, pegging a 6/6 on the battlefield into an empty board is nice, but that's pretty relevant to know. And then if you're playing this deck, you might want to practice taking opponents' turns for like every deck with Emrakul, because when you cast your Emrakul, it should end the game. And make sure you do a lot of different things, like making sure you attack your opponent's creatures into your creatures so you can effectively just kill them really easily. Make sure if your opponent has a Goblin Bombardment, sacking your opponent's board, dealing damage to you. If they have Pain lands, you can just tap those mana, have it deal damage to them. Play cards for no value, like play a card, hold priority, counter that card. You know how to deal a ton of damage and extract as many resources from your opponent as possible when you're playing Emrakul the Promised End. That is so important. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.